Hi guys, it's your guy Holumde, and today we're gonna be solving another one of the most commonly asked tech interview question in top tech companies including Google, Amazon, Netflix, Meta, Apple, Microsoft, and other top tech companies. The title of the problem is Merge Overlapping Intervals. The problem statement states that merge an array of intervals so there are no overlapping intervals and return the resultant merge intervals. We can see we are given an array of intervals here in this list of lists, this array. So, and the first list is 3, 4. So, if you follow along with our previous video that talks about introduction to interval, you get to know that interval are gonna be represented visually by a list. So that represents a list of 2 items, the start of the interval and the end of the interval. So each interval, every interval will have a start and an end position. So the first interval in this list of intervals is 3 to 4, where the start is 3 and the end is 4, and you can see it right here, 3 to 4. The second is 7 to 8, 7 to 8 right here. This is the second one, while the third is 2 to 5, I mean right here from this list of intervals. So the third interval is 2 to 5, and this is right here, 2 to 5. Then we have a 6 to 7, and then we have a 1 to 4 right here. So what the problem statement wants us to do is that it wants us to merge an array of intervals. So all these intervals, I want to merge it together, so such that there will be no overlapping intervals. So, and as we can see, look here now, we can see this a 3 to 4, and just below it is a 2 to 5. We see that 3 to 4 is within 2 to 5. So whenever we find out that it overlaps, we want to merge them together. So these two intervals of 3 to 4 and 2 to 5 now need not to be 2. It's too ambiguous, too redundant. So we just can merge it into just a single interval, because 3 to 4, I mean the range 3 to 4 now can be found in 2 to 5. Don't forget that 2 to 5 is actually 2, 3, 4, 5. So, and we can see that the interval 3 to 4 is contained within 2 to 4. So we want to merge them in cases like this. So in solving this problem, there are 2 challenges and 2 things we want to solve is to identify which interval overlap each other, and then to merge those intervals that overlap, just like I explained for this case now. So once I find the intervals out of course we are given an array of intervals, so we are going to glance through the intervals, we are going to find which one overlap which one, and we are going to merge those that overlap each other, so that we can come up with an output that contains an interval that never overlaps. Now we are going to be coming up with a 1 to 5 and a 6 to 8. So what you can see is that this interval never ever overlaps. So we are going to be walking through how this particular input, how we solve this problem and how it leads to this output. So, and the 2 things that is majorly considered is how to identify which interval overlaps, and then merging these intervals so that we can come up with an efficient interval that never overlap. Now let's start by tackling the first challenge, the one of identifying which interval overlaps. Now let's consider 2 intervals, A and B, interval A and interval B. So now we say that in this particular scenario, the intervals do not overlap. Why? Because the interval A ends, this interval A right here, it ends before B begins. So this is the start of the interval A at 2, this is the end at 5. So this is the end at 5 here. So whereas B, interval B starts at index 6 and end at 8. So we can say that the end of interval A finish before the start of interval B, therefore they do not overlap. So because A dot end is less than B dot start, so this dashed line represents the space. It indicates that they never overlap because they don't fall on each other. So A ends before B begins, so there's no overlapping. So but let's consider this other scenario still interval A and interval B now, we see that they overlap this time around because B starts at the same point whereby A ends. So you see that they overlap each other. So A is actually a range of 2 to 5, B is a range of 5 to 8. So, and because they lay on each other end, so it overlaps. So we also have a similar example here whereby they overlap, whereby A ends and B starts even before A ends. So we can see clearly here that they also overlap. So whenever the end of A, meaning that the end of interval of A, so the interval we have the start and the end value. So whenever this end value of the first interval, which is interval A, comes or ends before the beginning or the start of the second interval, definitely they overlap. So just like in this case now, where we have 4 to 8 and 2 to 5 and 4 to 8, so they overlap. So whenever A dot end is greater than or equals to B dot start, that is A ends after B have started or at the point whereby B starts. Let me say that B starts at the end before A ends. So whenever the interval B has a start attribute that is lesser than the end of A, that is here now the end of A is 5, A end at the line 5, while B start at the line 4. So because of that, definitely they overlap because A does not end before B starts. So but in this situation whereby A end then B started, so A end at first, just like here we see that A end at 0.5 while B start at 0.6, so there's no overlap here. But if they are both on the same point, such that where A end is exactly where B starts, or even B starts before A ends, definitely they overlap. So if A dot end is less than B dot start, meaning that the first interval actually ends before the second interval starts, definitely the end value of the first interval is smaller than the start value of the second interval, and in a situation like that the interval doesn't overlap. But in a situation whereby A end after B started, or at the same point whereby A ends, B also starts, then the interval overlaps. Now we have now solved the challenge of identifying when an interval overlaps. You see, out of the two challenges we are considering identifying and then merging those intervals. So we can now save an two interval overlap if the first one ends after the second one started, or at the same point whereby the first one ends, the second one started. That is, if A dot end is greater than or equals to B dot end, where A is the first interval and B is the second interval, then it overlap. If not, if A end then B now started, definitely does not overlap. So we are going to be considering how to now merge overlapping intervals. But before we talk about the second challenge, let's just address and finish this first one about identifying which interval overlap each other. So fine, we can identify which interval overlap each other, but what about how do we know which particular interval comes first? You know, we in this example that we given, we already assume that A comes first before B, and so therefore if A ends before B ends, before B starts, definitely it does not overlap. But if A ends after B started, then it overlap. So now we need to be able to determine which of the interval actually starts first, which one is A, which one is B. So, and one way you can do this is to sort the interval, to sort the array of interval. So after sorting by their start value, look at now, once we sort it, we know that this is 1 to 4. So definitely this out of the all intervals that we have in this array, this is the start. So, and then it is going to be followed by 2, which is the next start, followed by 3, which is the next start. So we're going to be sorting them by their start values, followed by 6 and 7. So that way now we can know that between two adjacent intervals, if we want to check if they overlap, then we can always be sure that because it is sorted, the one to the left, that is the one that comes first, is the first interval. So while the one that comes second is the second interval. So that way we can be able to identify if they overlap. So we're gonna get them sorted, and that way when we are comparing intervals, we know that the first one they are sorted order. So we know the first one is the one that comes first before the second one. So with the above logic and idea that we have, let's try to solve this particular interval problem. Like, let's still solve it to the all we know. Let's start to apply them now. The first step is to sort this interval by their start value, right? So we're gonna sort it, and by sorting this interval, this list of intervals, we're gonna be having this. So by their start value, so, and we can say that what the interval that starts from 1 will come before the one that starts from 2, then 3, then 6, then 7. So to make it more understanding, this is it visually. So this is the array visually, the one of 1 to 4, followed by the one of 2 to 5, followed by the one of 3 to this, and then 6 to 7, and 7 to 8. So right now, since the problem statement asks us to return the merge intervals, so that does not contain overlaps, definitely we want to be creating a new array that will be adding and appending the intervals that does not contain overlap into. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna create a new array called merge, and then we're gonna start with the first array in the sorted intervals of array, right? So which is 1 to 4. So we're gonna add it to the merge array that we are trying to add the intervals to, and we are gonna add the first one because fine, we've not considered any other intervals, therefore the first one does not contain overlap. At least in our merge array is still empty, so we are gonna add the first one into it, and this is the first one right here, 1 to 4, according to it being ordered after we order it, after we sort it. Now after the first interval is added to the array, to the merged array, we can now start the process of merging. So why I say that is because the very first interval does not contain any we don't actually have to compare it with any other interval because the merge is still empty for now, and so it's just the first one. So now we're gonna be defining A as the last interval in the merged array. Why? Because the array just contains one interval, right? The first interval. So we're gonna define it as A, and we're gonna define B as the next interval in the input, in the sorted list of intervals. Don't forget we sort it. So, and it makes sense. Don't forget, in our analogy and our logic, we explained that A is gonna be the first interval, B is gonna be the second interval, right? So, and it makes sense because if we could add the first interval in our sorted array into the merge, that is nice to be the A, while the next interval in the in our sorted array will be B. So now we could notice that B starts before A ends, and that means an overlap. This is B right here, so it's the 2 to 5 in our sorted array of intervals, while this is A, which is the very first one. So in the process of comparing, we say that B starts before A ends. A end at this point 4, but B start at this point 2, so that indicates an overlap. So we see that A dot end is actually greater than or equals to B dot start, which means an overlap. So we need to merge A and B because they overlap. Now to merge A and B, we are gonna use the leftmost, or how will I put it, we are gonna use A dot start because we are quite sure that A comes before B, because A is actually the first interval, so it is the one that have the smallest start at least. So A comes before B. So to make sure we cover up all the possible interval between A and B that we are trying to match together, what we do is that we're gonna select A dot start. That's one. That way we are. If you look at it really, you see that A dot start is 1, B is 2. So we want to go for A dot start, being assured that A always starts before B because A is first interval in the array, in the sorted array, right? So now to match the a and b together now, the our right value mean that we've chosen a dot start to be the start of the interval of the new merged interval. We're trying to merge a and b into a new interval because they contain overlap, so merging is possible, and we're choosing a dot start to represent the left of this new interval because it is, at least we are sure that it is to the extreme most. So now to decide what we'll put as the next the end of the interval, we've defined the start of the interval as a dot start. To define the end of the interval is gonna be the maximum between a dot end and b dot end. So we are trying to merge the two interval. So and a dot end points at 4, b dot end points at 5. So to make an efficient margin, so we are gonna go for the maximum between b dot end and a dot end, and that gives us b dot end because b dot end is 5. So therefore we'll be coming this will be extending, you know, our merge actually consists of our merge array consists of this a, which is 1,4, which is the very first interval. Now we will be updating that 1,4 to 1,5 because in choosing whenever two interval merge like that, we're gonna choose a dot start because we are guaranteed that a dot start will be toward the left. I mean, it will be smallest than b dot start. Why? Because we have already get the intervals sorted in ascending order, so we can be sure that a comes before b. So that's why we're choosing a dot start. But we are to choose the other end of the interval, we are going to be choosing maximum, the one that is maximum between a dot end and b dot end. Why I'm saying this is that who knows, you know, in this case the first interval is 1,4. What could have happened if the first interval is actually 1,7 and, you know, the second interval remains 2,5? Right, this is the first interval 1,4. But who knows, what of if in the problem statements the second interval is actually or the first interval is actually 1,7 and not 1,4? So we won't want to go for b dot end. Fine, we are always assured because we've already sorted the interval, we are always assured that a dot start will represent the smallest value. I mean, it will be farther to the left, but we can't guarantee that a dot end or b dot end will be the farther to the right when margin overlaps, the two overlaps. So depending on how the intervals are given to us, a dot end or b dot end could be the value to the right. So we just have to find the maximum between both of them so that we can have a full cover of both intervals. So that's why I'm using maximum between b dot end and this, and so definitely what we do is that we are gonna change update our merge, which consists of 1,4, right, which is the first element. We are gonna change it to 1,5, and that way we have effectively and efficiently merged the two array of 1,4 and 2,5, so to 1,5 by choosing a dot start as the left and the right as the maximum between a dot end and b dot end. So after doing that, what we just do is that we move our b to the next the next interval in the input intervals that we have sorted, right? So that's what we do. So and then that is 3,4 in the sorted interval. So don't forget our a is still there. Our merge array actually consists of just one because it was 1,4. Now we shifted it to 1,5 because it's found an overlapping with the immediate next array in the array of intervals, right? So comparing this also, we say that it falls under, we'll be looking at this now, you understand, this merge array. So now a dot end actually is greater than b dot start, so there's an overlap again because the merge, this a, which is still our a, is actually 1,5, right? And then b now is 3,4. So we see that is an overlap. Why is it an overlap? Because a dot end is actually greater than or equals to b dot start. So the interval a ends after the interval b starts. You understand? So there's an overlap. So and because of that, we are gonna choose a dot start again, right? and we're gonna choose the maximum between a dot end and b dot end, right, which is a dot end. I mean, for this second interval in the array, which is 3, 4, we're gonna choose the maximum between our current a has an a dot end to be 5, and the current b has a b dot end to be 4. So the maximum is what? Is definitely 5, which is the same as a dot end. So it's definitely 5, and we're gonna go for that. So, and that's why our array, our merge array, remains the same as 1, 5. So this is actually a situation. Imagine if we are just choosing b dot end. So we are gonna get across a mistake, because it's just gonna limit it to 4. So it has to be the maximum whatsoever of a and b, because since it overlap, we want to get the maximum length that we could ever have. So what we're gonna do again is that we're gonna shift our b further to the right in the input array, in the sorted intervals, array of intervals. So, and this is it here. So coming right here, we see that we are gonna first check if they overlap, right? So if they overlap, so, and because we have our merge array, which is array a, to be 1, 5, and this new array b that b is pointing to is 6, 7, we see they do not overlap. Why? Because a dot end actually does not actually a dot end is less than b dot start, because a dot end is 5, b dot start is 6, so there's no overlap. And what we do is that we are going to add b to the merge list. Don't forget that the problem statement asks us to return an array that's, let's what the problem statement asks us to return. So return the resultant merge intervals. So it has to be merged, meaning that in the returned array that we are going to return, it must not contain any merge interval. So because this does not merge, we're going to be putting it there into the array, right? So let's go for it. So we're going to add it, and that's what we did right here. So our array now consists of 2. The first one is 1, 5, the second one is 6, 7, because it does not overlap. And because of that, we are going to be shifting our a from, you understand, to the current interval in the merge list now. Why? Because this particular, where it was before is 1, 5, now we are in a 6, 7, and we are guaranteed that we will be moving our b further from where it is to the next point. And because we know that we got our input array sorted, definitely b is gonna be moving to a new interval with a greater start value, because it's ascending in the input array, right? So we have to move our a also to the latest interval in the merge, so that it can work out well. So we're gonna consider what I'm trying to say here. So now we move our b to the next element after adding the previous one to the array, because it does not match, right? So moving our b now, so this is our a, our a is here, right here. So, and now when we compare this a to it, which is a 6, 7, so we see that the b is actually a 7, 8. It does overlap. Why? Because a dot end is greater than or equals to b dot start, so it overlaps, and we're gonna merge a and b together, right? So that's what we're going to be doing here. So, and to merge it, what we go for is a dot start, which is this particular 6, and the maximum between a dot end and b dot end, and we say that is b dot end, because a dot end is 7 and b dot end is 8. So, and therefore we are able to extend this second array in our merge list, so to become a dot start and b dot end. So, and that's it. So then we say that we are done. That's the last element in our array, and then we just return this merged array that consists of 1, 5 and intervals 1, 5 and 6, 8. So this is how we solve this problem. So the whole problem just boiled down into 2 challenges. First, identifying which interval overlaps, and then merging this interval that overlap. And how we can identify is first by sorting the input intervals, right? Input array of intervals, sort them, then after sorting them, pick the first one as a reference, because there's no interval before the first one, so got to pick the first one as a reference. And then right from the second one, we are going to be looking if the end of A, which is the first interval in the merge, if the end is greater than or equals to the start of the second interval. If it is, definitely it overlaps. And if it overlaps like that, we try to add it into the merge array. So we but if it does not overlaps, then if it overlap, actually we are gonna update the the first interval in the merge output, right? In the output array of interval, we need to extend it so that it could become merged with that current B. If A and B overlap, then we need to update A in the merged output so that it could contain B. So by doing A dot start and maximum between A dot end and B dot end. But if it does not overlap at all, we just need to add that particular that particular interval that does not overlaps. We have to add it into the merge array, and we have to update our A so that it will reference that latestly added one. Why? Because by moving B forward subsequently, it's just gonna go into a greater or an interval with a greater start value. So we have to update A also to be at the latest interval in the merge, and we just keep doing that on and on until we get to the end. So we're gonna be seeing and understanding more in the code implementation that we're going into now. Alright, let's go into the code implementation. Firstly, we're gonna be defining the interval class. So this interval class, like in my previous video, I told you about the fact that we do represent interval as a class. Even though visually you might be seeing interval as something like this, you might be seeing interval in form of 3,4 here, but to make it more presentable and easy to work with interval, we are going to represent it by a class that will be having the start and end attributes. So start and end. So for easy access of this attribute, so we're going to be defining self.start as start and self.end as end, right? So this is just it. Now from the problem statement, as you can see on the screen, we have this range of intervals, and then although they are given to us as a list, you understand, list of 3, 4, 7, 8, but I am just converting them into an interval class that still have the same start and end attribute. So for the list of 3, 4, the interval of 3, 4 now, I represent it as interval class with the start of 3 and end of 4, and the same applies to 7 and 8, 2 and 5, 6 and 7, and 1 and 4. So these are the code implementation of those intervals that you can see on the screen. And right here is the list of intervals. So this particular interval that I create, 3, 4, 7, 8, so these are their lists, just like how they are in the problem statement. So now that we have an understanding of how we come across how to create interval class and how to create the these particular functions, how to create the list of intervals. So this is what we call the array of intervals here. So now we are gonna be defining a function. So I just try to call the function up front here and passing the interval, so for better understanding. So but this is the function now. It's gonna be taking in an interval. It's gonna be taking in an intervals, so which is actually a list of intervals, our interval class, right? And it's gonna be returning likewise a list of intervals, because we are the problem statement asks us to return a list of, so the problem statement asks us to return the problem statement asks us to return a list of the to merge the overlapping interval, and to return a list of merged overlapping intervals, so that that list will not contain any merged any overlapping interval any longer. So the first thing we're going to be doing is to sort our intervals, because we need them to be sorted so we can identify any overlapping interval. After identifying, we can now merge them together. So let's first sort the intervals. Intervals dot sort. So in the process of sorting, we are going to be sorting the key. We are going to be sorting by their start value. So key equals to lambda x such that s dot start. So we are sorting based on their start value. That's what. So this is a function. We like an anonymous function in Python that will help us to direct how the key value, the key of the sorting. So it's going to determine how the sort is going to be happening. And what we just did that for each of the interval, is going to be sorting them based on their stats attributes. So after sorting now, we are going to be defining the merge array now. So that is going to hold the very first interval. So intervals of 0. So the very first interval is going to be contained. So this merge array is an array of merged interval, right? So after doing this, we want to iterate through our interval right from the second one. The first was already in the merge, so we want to iterate through right from the second one. 1 comma len of intervals. So, and what we want to do is that first we want to check if this first interval now is our interval A, the first interval, while the second interval is what we are going to be treating through right now, the current index, right? So we want to check if the first interval and the next interval, which is starting from the index 1 right here, if they overlap. So that's what we want to check, if they do overlap. And we can check them by saying that if merge of -1, that is still the last the last interval in the merged array, if its start value, if its end value, don't forget the end value, if it is greater than or equals to intervals of I, the current index, dot start, that is the start attribute, the start of the current index. So if what's just trying to say is that if the end of A is greater than or equals to the start of B, definitely they overlap, and because of that we want to change the end. Look what I want to do here. So when I set the end to the maximum between the merge of -1 dot end and then intervals of I dot start. So what I did is that, so because they overlap now, we definitely know that A dot start is not a problem, because A is representing the very first element that we have after sorting, right? So it's fine. But A dot end, that is the first index, or the index in the merge array, dot end is what we want to change. So it can either be the maximum between, it can either be the A dot end or B dot end, so or B dot end, right? Depending on the maximum between them. So that's why I place it to maximum between the A dot end and, sorry, this ought to be end, so maximum between the two end. So just like we explained the logic, right? So after this, but in a situation whereby they don't map, they don't overlap, in a situation whereby they don't overlap, what we want to do is that else we want to just append into our merge dot append. So what I want to append is this new interval that never overlaps, intervals of I. So we're just gonna map append it there. After doing that now, that's all. So it's just gonna iterate through the rest of the, aside from the first one, because we added the first one already, so it's gonna iterate through the rest of the intervals in the array, and depending on whether they overlap or not, if they overlap, it's gonna merge it. If there's no overlap, it's gonna append it. So we have taken care of how we'll be shifting our A in case there's no overlap. That's why we're using -1 here. So it's always gonna reference the very last interval in the array, right? So, and after that, we just want to return this expression. Don't forget that the process allows us to return the an array of merged interval, whereby every overlapping interval will be merged together. So what I want to do is that I want to return an array of array here. So that would be, let me say, interval dot start comma interval dot end. So for interval in merged, right? So, and why we are doing this is because if you look at it, what we are appending into our merge is actually an interval object. It's not a start or end, it's an interval object. That's why we can say that merge of -1 dot start, merge of -1 dot end. So, and we are sure that our merge at the end of the day will contain non-overlapping intervals. So we just want to iterate through each interval in the merge array, and to use a list comprehension to create a list of array, so which will represent the start and the end of each interval. So this is how we solve this problem. Let's quickly run through it. Let's run it and see how it goes. Fine. Okay, let's see. Oh, really, it's output 1,5 and 6,8, which is actually correct. Right from the problem statement, you will see that it's correct. So, and why it's correct is because I don't know how to go through it quickly here, but this is a 1,4 here, and we have a 2,5, so these two will overlap to become 1,5. Also, we have a 6,7 and a 7,8, which will overlap to become a 6,8. So this is how we solve this problem. You can go over it again, and I really hope you understand this. Alright, thank you.